it's Kim here, and we're doing another member interview with Senna Magdalene. So welcome. You're in West Cork in Ireland, so it's very early. Thank you for getting up so early to do this. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
So Senna is a Magdalene energy practitioner, divine healing master key practitioner, quantum human design specialist, soul contract practitioner, EFT practitioner, meditation facilitator, and spiritual artist with a soul's mission to inspire you to align and shine your, your beautiful self, but it's be you to full self, be your full self kind of. I love how you've done that. And your website is Dawn of Shekinah. We're going to get back to that. dawnofshekinah.net, and it's in the in your member profile for anyone that wants to go and click through from there. That's an easy thing to do. So hi, that was a mouthful. You've got a lot of stuff there that you have done, and I saw that this all started, you had a kind of spontaneous awakening in the early 2000s. So this has all come about since then. About same me, I think. Actually, I think we might have mentioned that it was about the same time.
Oh, really? Yeah. I realized now that it was actually my guru calling me. At the time, I didn't know what on earth was going on because I really didn't have any kind of spiritual upbringing. Apart from maybe connecting with nature would have been my thing, but I was in a yoga class, and I joined the yoga class really for my health, my physical body. I'd been experiencing a lot of tiredness and fatigue in the body, and it was around about the time of my Saturn return, and I was doing this yoga class, and I realized I was just naturally really good at yoga, and I guess I'd done it in previous lifetimes. And after one class, I was lying in Shavasana at the end, and they put on this guided meditation, which was a bit unusual. It was a new teacher, and all of a sudden I just had this spontaneous, really, it's actually the most profound experience I've ever had since. And I found a gateway in my heart, and I lifted, my consciousness lifted out of my body, but it was more than just an out-of-body experience. I actually went into a state of bliss and ecstasy and oneness. And it was like I transcended the senses. So I wasn't experiencing on a sensory level like with normal senses, but it was like everything became really vivid, really like I'd woke up and I didn't know what had happened.
I've always been intrigued by this, and then you kind of came out of it, and then what like how do you integrate that experience at the end of your yoga class?
Well, I actually, first thing I felt was guilt, and I didn't understand that, but I was like, I shouldn't be feeling this. This is amazing. This is beyond. It was so intense. It was nearly on kind of it's like I couldn't experience it, but I was experiencing it, but it was so intense. And then I felt this huge guilt for experiencing it. And then after the guilt came fear. And I struggled then, what on earth is happening to me? Am I dying? I had no idea what was going on. And I struggled to get back in my body. And all these questions, has everybody else been getting this? And this is the first time I've ever experienced it.
It's a normal part of your yoga class.
No reference. And I went to my yoga teacher after, and she's like, I think you need to go to an ashram, Sana. Like, this is way beyond anything that I can guide you with. And that was kind of the start of my journey, like searching, because my life just couldn't be the same again after that.
So what happened? Like, I'm really curious about, like, what happened the next day, like immediately? It must have been disorienting for quite a while.
Yeah, like I say, I was in a lot of fear,
How
but
long
I
did
was
that
also
last?
it lasted until I actually knew I had to go find somebody that could assist me, because
Yeah.
it really was, the thing was, I hadn't done anything to make it happen. And I realized now it was because I completely let go, I completely surrendered. And that was the key, that Shiva, that Shavasana.
Yeah.
That some part of me just completely let go and I transcend it. But everybody was telling me they didn't, let my so-called teachers just didn't do it. Stay in the body. I was like, but I didn't do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
So eventually I had a connection in Ireland, actually, because I'd been coming over here. My brothers were living here, and I was friends with their girlfriends, and one of their girlfriends knew of a woman, a healer in Galway. And she was like, I think you should talk to her. So I got on I had a session with her on a call, and she completely changed the energy of the experience for me. She was like, oh, how wonderful. And she was like, well, basically, what are you most scared about? And I'm like, well, that I was dying. And she said, well, if you were dying and you're in ecstasy, what's the problem? I was like, oh. So that completely shifted everything. And
Yeah.
so I actually followed that up, and I went for a live session with her. I traveled to Ireland. That's what a big deal this was for me. It was like my whole world had completely changed. And I went for a session with her in Ireland, and she actually introduced me to the work of Byron Katie. She had just met her in person, and she realized that I hadn't actually done anything on a spiritual path to make this happen. It was a spontaneous thing, and I think, like I shared, it had come up for a previous lifetime, having done this kind of practices before. And so she introduced me to kind of the work of questioning your thoughts and your mind and your perception. And again, that was a huge uplifting of consciousness for me. But I didn't continue with that work, although it was really powerful. My life actually fell apart. My everyday life fell apart. My relationship ended. Um, I basically walked away with everything with a suitcase. Hadn't a clue where I was going. I owned a house. Left my parents, my family. Everybody kind of disowned me. It was pretty
I'm
extreme.
so struck by how similar our stories are with this. Keep going,
Yeah.
and then I'll give you a very brief description of what happened to me. It's so similar. Go on.
Okay, so I was in bits, to be honest, but
Yeah.
I knew the one thing that it was like a shamanic death. It was
Yeah.
like the one thing that was keeping me going was this connection that I'd experienced with spirit. And I didn't, my personality didn't want to leave. It was my soul. It was nearly like it was pushed out. And it was really like I had no idea how I was going to survive, but I would put one foot out and the thing would land underneath me, and the next foot and something would land. And I found myself in Ireland. Because my brothers were living in Sligo at the time, I had something to move to. And then within 3 months, I was introduced to West Cork, and I just knew this was my place. And within, I'd say, a year and a half, 2 years, year and a half, I heard about my guru. And I wasn't looking for a guru,
So
but
tell us about that, because it's unusual these days for someone to have a guru. I don't know, I think in terms of like the people I work with, it's unusual. So tell me a bit about that and what that is for you. What's that relationship about for you?
gosh, it's the biggest blessing in my life.
Yeah.
Honestly, I actually don't know if I'd be alive in the body today if I hadn't met her. My life was in such a mess before, in my trauma. And Well, when I met her, I actually started having dreams and experiences before I met or even heard about her. Very kind of prophetic dreams where I realised I'd actually been alive at the time that Mary Magdalene and Jesus was on the planet together. I'd been somehow in that community as a disciple. And I was like, what is this coming from? Because I'm not religious. But it was a big connection to Mary Magdalene. And then when I landed in West Cork, I was introduced to an amazing psychic woman who, she's a cellular empath. So she would, her work would be to kind of connect into your soul and help you, I guess, to guide you into your highest expression. Or yeah, so she got me at a time where I was very lost. And what she was saying to me, I had no idea what she was going on about, but one part of me did. Everything in me lit up. And she had just met Saima, my guru, about a month before. And I started sharing some of the dreams and visions I'd been having. One of the visions I'd had before I left Shetland was of a brain looking for the side, but it was like, at the time I said it was like a computerized diagram of the brain. I saw 3 different pathways in the brain. And I was like, my consciousness doesn't think like this. What is this? And I actually got angelic words coming through at the time as well, and all sorts of mad stuff. And I told her about this, and she's like, oh my God, this is the work that Saima does. She works on bringing light into the structures in the brain, and you have to meet her. And so that time I just wanted somebody to help me understand my experience. And so, and I also, didn't have much money, and it just transpired. I was like, if I'm meant to meet this woman, help me to go see her. And within a year that happened, I had the money. I went to the States. She was working in the States predominantly at that time, to one of these big events. And the very first event, what she shared about how as a soul we choose to come into source, to have an experience as an individual being. She was sharing how this process happens. And one of the first things she shared about is when we come out of source, if we experience shock or the separation, and then we experience guilt, because the guilt is that we've made that decision to leave and we realize, oh my God, I want to get back there, but we can't just go back. We've got to go all the way around. And that telling me about guilt, it was like, okay, no, I understand.
You recognize she described your process to you.
Yeah.
I just want to give you, I don't want to interrupt your flow too much, but I just want to say the things that were so similar, that I had this kind of, I actually had a collapse where I just zoned out. I was just gone. I was sitting in court. Our court case had finished, but I was just sitting there, and I woke up ages later. I'd just been sitting in the chair and I just disappeared. I'd been there, I don't know how long. They turned all the lights down. I kind of woke up and I was sitting in this empty court. And then I slept for 3 years. But what was really interesting, I had no experience of anything kind of spiritual. Like a bit after that, I actually went and had a tarot card reading, and I was so scared because that was so weird. Tarot, I'd never seen a tarot card. So I was really nervous about having a tarot card reading. But also a woman moved into our house to share one of the rooms in our house at the time, not long after I was sick. And I was almost too sick to sit up at the time. She was the director of the local Tibetan Buddhist center, and she used to take me to the center and basically prop me up with pillows in the corner of the library. And I
Wow.
just used to read, and I could read I read everything I could get my hands on. But at the same time that was happening, I was completely unable to have conversations with people because I couldn't follow what people were saying. And I also, I used to make myself get up at midday and for half an hour and eat something. And I used to watch old episodes of Perry Mason were on the TV. And I was a lawyer. So it was kind of good because I was grieving the loss of I'd completely lost my previous life.
Yeah.
But I couldn't follow a half-hour TV. I couldn't remember who the characters were if they'd gone off the screen for a minute. So that's the level my brain was working. But at the same time, I could understand all of these Tibetan texts. And I had a sense of almost like a visitation of my lineage guru in the Tibetan tradition. And I was at Coolangatta, near where I lived. I was just walking up the street and I saw a little Tibetan Buddhist thing in a New Age shop window, and I burst into tears at that heart connection.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
I never got any further really involved or anything, but so many parallels. I find it really
Yeah.
fascinating.
Seems very similar. I didn't have the fatigue as such, but a lot of depression came up after. I didn't even realize I was depressed. I've been depressed my whole life,
Yeah, wow.
and that experience triggered all of the deep trauma. And thankfully, I was brought to my guru that she immediately gave me techniques so that I could start working on,
Yeah.
because it wasn't even so much my emotional body, it was my mental body.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting.
yeah,
And just one of the things that I found kind of interesting in terms of the parallel was I didn't have the tools to do the work because I had no previous experience with any of this. And I would
yeah,
go to psychologists and they were no help at all because it wasn't operating on the level I needed it to be.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I say, it really was the biggest blessing in my life. A
Yeah.
lot of people think that a guru comes and they're scared because you're going to become dependent, and it's actually completely the opposite.
Yeah.
It's been she she holds you. Gurus are there to they have this huge high frequency energy field that,
Mm.
especially when you're with them in person, it lifts your vibration up. And then if they're a real guru, they give you these practices that show you how to get there yourself.
Mm.
So the amount of work that you put in yourself, the more that the closer they can come to you, because you're opening to that assistance. Nobody can do anything to you if or help you if you don't allow it. That's the free will that we have.
Yeah.
So it's really the whole journey, because it's a bhakti, it's a devotion, it's through love. It's teaching me how to be heart-centered.
Mm.
So it's really about surrender to spirit, to love, to my highest expression. And we're scared of that. We're terrified of that because we have all these constructs that we've created around the core traumas, and that constructs are like crutches that we've used to navigate through life. And you talk about the crutches, you're like, what happened to you and what happened to me? Oh my God, everything is gone and I don't know how to cope anymore. But the role of a guru is that they will come and they'll like take off one for a little while and put it back again, and then a different one and put it back, and then take it off for a whole day. And so eventually you've got no crutches and you can be in the full expression of the soul, the higher self. So that's been my
Amazing.
journey.
Amazing. And then, so once you started to stabilize in this new experience of who you are, what how did you get led from that place to doing what you're doing now? What was that journey about for you?
Well, I actually had another really big healing before what I'm doing now. It was 9 years ago. I think I've shared a bit in the community. The partner that I've been with for 7 years in Shetland, that I shared the house with, and I left because we were on separate paths. He took a totally separate path, and he became a heroin addict. And 9 years ago, he overdosed and he died. And it was like my biggest nightmare. It was the biggest trauma that I could ever imagine, because the love was still there. But when you know that you can't be with somebody, if it was just, yeah. And I think it was karma. It was something I had to experience, and also to help wake me up more. I have a journey experiencing life, death stuff. So when he died, the biggest trauma came up in me, but spirit came, my guru came in with, are you going to stay in this paradigm, in this reality? Are you going to wake up? It's like, do you believe in death? I was like, no. And something in my brain switched. It was like, and the trauma was gone. But what happened, I was in ceremony. I was sharing with a client yesterday for a period of about 3 weeks. It was like the ceremony was coming through me rather than me doing anything. So some part of me started guiding some process, which ended up in a really intense Kundalini awakening, which the actual Kundalini awakening lasted about six hours. All night it went on. And it wasn't a blissful experience like some people hear it, but it was actually like I had lightning going through my body. There was no pain, but very, very intense. And what actually happened, I was guided through the whole thing, but what actually happened was, it felt like my whole energy field was stripped away. I went back to source, and then I was guided back again into the body with a whole new consciousness. I was even coded as I was coming back in. And I was told that I was switching timelines. So I'd had a bit walk-ins before that, and I was questioning, am I having a walk-in experience? But it was more that I knew I was still the same soul. It was more like a higher aspect to me was coming in. And after speaking to some experts in the field, I've realized that I actually, it was like a reincarnation in the same body. So it was planned. I knew it was a planned thing that my soul had intended. So since then, for 9 years, I've been integrating that, because that was, again, it was pretty scary. I was out to it. I mean, I'm usually pretty on the planet, but I was really had to stay together with that. And then in 2020, when COVID happened, just before that, I got this strong feeling. I actually built a business in that 9 years, making artisan hats. I had a hat shop. But upstairs, I had a little room that I started finally charging for my spiritual work and doing meditations and energy work. I trained in various things. I trained as a Magdalena practitioner in that time with my guru, had various initiations. And then, but my hats was taking up so much of my energy and time, and I really wasn't earning enough money to justify it. It was fun, but it was, I didn't come to the planet to make hats.
Yeah, clearly not.
And So again, I had this thing where I had to walk away from all of that. I didn't have a choice. It wasn't working. And I found myself, oh my God, what am I doing now? I had to move house, and I had no space in my other house to be able to do that work. And I started running workshops, spiritual workshops, kind of healing workshops, doing different practices my guru taught me, but also EFT to bring up trauma. So I was working with a group. And it was working, but lots of money issues. I found at one point I had no food in the fridge, couldn't pay my rent. Car had broken down. I was like thinking I was going to be on this.
It's such an interesting thing to actually be in that really kind of big space. I remember having a big conversation with my mother one day, and I said to her, I've got $10. That's it.
Yeah.
And she was freaking out. And I said, I can't tell you how happy I am, Mum. Like, my life is amazing.
I've got to say I was freaking out in this.
Yeah,
because
I have had
really
moments of that as well, but it's interesting. You
but
can
my
kind of
work,
have these,
my work had never been better. The energy that was coming through me and the level of work I was offering to people, and it was like, okay, come on now, what the heck? I've said I'm here for my sole purpose. What happened is, and I actually had a health issue come up that I was actually really scared about, but I knew I couldn't go to the doctor about it, because I was like, I have to heal this myself. I have to find a way. And I reached a point where I just surrendered again. I was like, okay, I obviously didn't have a clue what I'm doing here. You got to show me. And I surrendered. And COVID happened that same week. And everybody was on the same level. But for me, it was like, oh, finally, this is what I'm here for. I found my purpose. It was like, I wasn't scared about COVID.
Yeah. So how did that, what was that purpose that got revealed at that stage for you?
So firstly, the money thing kind of worked out because the government started supporting people. So I was given this break, and I was able to move. I've been resisting moving online, but here everybody was going online, and I wanted to serve. So I started offering meditations online to the people that I've been working out with that were freaking out and really scared. And I didn't feel scared about that at all. I was totally in my thing. But at the same time, human design landed. And this is really interesting.
Yes, so
this is a long way to answer your question.
But it's so fascinating. So we had to do that. Go on.
So actually 6 months before, when I first moved into this new house, I'd been doing an online kind of self-study thing, and somebody I'd never met before, hadn't even spoken to, sent me a message. I think you should look at human design. And I'm like, who are you? And so I looked at it, and it was like, gosh, this is really interesting, but I'm way too busy to look at this. I've got to do this. I've got to make money. I've got to support myself. Oh my God, what's going on? And I didn't look at it. And then I found myself penniless, fridge bare, all of that. And then that same week, COVID happened, human design came in through my inbox again. They're completely, again, a source that I had no idea who this was. And I looked at it. Hello. Yeah, in my surrender. And so I was like, oh my God. And I kind of looked for different teachers, and Karen Curry Parker started resonating with me because she was speaking about raising the frequency of the language, which was all about my guru's work. How do we up level in frequency and use specific words, and you can choose the vibration that we're communicating in. And so I started kind of studying with Karen, but the thing was, when I kind of got the bones of the system, it was like, I know this is no new to me. Like, and it was nearly like all of the work I'd done with my guru before on just working on myself. I finally had a system that I could share my inspirations and my intuitions that I was perceiving in other people. I had a system to show them what I was seeing in them, or what was coming through
and it's
to
so
me.
interesting if you can show them a chart, that people are so much more open to what you're giving them as well.
Totally. And what it did for me in the beginning was, firstly, I'm a manifesting generator, so it helped me understand how I had gone off track in terms of my strategy when I was actually in alignment with my practices and spirit, and I wasn't triggered. I would flow with that natural strategy. But when I got triggered, especially by money stuff, then I would go into panic, and I wouldn't wait for the guidance. I wouldn't wait for the signs. And I would try and cope and do everything myself and throw my energy about all over the place. And I ended up in burnout. I was in complete burnout by that stage. And it was like, oh my God, I finally understand what I'm doing. And with that information, realizing I had this whole lineage, this team in the higher dimensions, they wanted to work with me, wanted to support me. And because of my trauma, I wasn't open to them. I wasn't attacking guidance. I wasn't asking, even though I'd had a guru for 15 years at that stage. Some part of me was closed in, and I had this belief I have to do it all by myself.
It's timing, though, isn't it? I mean, there's been such incredible timing all the way along here with you, that things have been very specific in terms of the timing. And one of the things that I think is important for us all to remember is how, when the time's right, something becomes obvious to us, and that's because it was the time for that to happen. It was the time for that realization or that integration or whatever.
And the line 3, I've got a big line 3 activation we were sharing before about that in the chat, in the community. Because I'd had that extreme experience of having that 6 months of living on nothing really, and by no asking for guidance, for no allowing support to come, I got myself in a situation so that when the solution came, I was so passionate about it. I couldn't wait to share this with other people. So I was doing readings with people right from the very beginning. First of all, with my close friends, but then because it was what I was meant to do, life just kept bringing me clients for everybody to start flooding in, because I was so passionate about sharing this, and I finally had a system that I could teach with, like share through. And so, and then to tie up with the Kundalini awakening, I then started realizing that I had actually this death, that some part of me had died and I'd come back again, and I pulled out my chart for the Kundalini awakening, and everything, the chart was the same thing that I was being told during this awakening.
So I just want to clarify. So when you say you put, because I know, because you and I have talked about this, but you actually created a new chart for that from the time that happened. So it was like that was a rebirth for you, and so this is a new chart.
More than just a transit chart. It was like I knew that I'd somehow been reborn at that time. So I'd spoken a bit to Karen about this in a Q&A, and she channels, and she channeled everything that I was told during the experience at that time, which affirmed what I'd been told. And then I was like, well, who the heck am I? And what is my design? And what is my chart? And so, yeah, there's been a whole process in that.
There's so many things I really love about that. And one of them is this idea of getting away from how prescriptive human design is in terms of this is your, and you know how I'm always like playing with that, but that one chart. And sometimes people will come to me for a reading and maybe they've probably just kind of learnt, maybe a year in or something, and they've dabbled a little bit, read on the internet, whatever. But I'll put the screen share on, and sometimes I'll have maybe their spiritual expression chart up accidentally, and they go into a panic. They're like, that's not me, that's not me. There's so many ways to view the chart, and not just that, boom, that one kind of structure that's fixed and unchanging.
But it gave me so much validation, I cannot tell you, because the experience was so intense, and it was nearly like I nearly lost my mind, because it was you kind of, I was having voices speaking to me the whole time, and all of this information, codes coming through. I was barely clinging on to any sense of kind of groundedness or reality. And I just nearly wanted just to get back to normal life after that. But again, it was so amazing. So when, after the integration, at that time it was 7 years, to actually have the validation through human design or the experience I'd had, very detailed validation, it was helped me to really accept and integrate whatever had happened, and you can to own it, and to realize what a blessing it was.
Do you use both charts now, or which, like, if you're thinking about your personal human design, how do you think about it now?
I'm still in that process. I've been working mainly with the natal chart, especially we coming into the community with you, but sometimes I get insights, look at your Kundalini chart, and that's what I find the information I'm looking for. So how Karen explained it, it was like I still had my natal chart, but it was like an overlay. But the bit I'm not quite sure about is, because you've got the body consciousness layer, that stays the same because you're still in the same body. So the soul layer is coming in, but I'm not sure with the Kundalini chart if there is the body consciousness coming in as well, because I very much resonated with the incarnation cross, which has the whole package. So I'm trying not to be too fixed about it. I just kind of let it flow.
It's so interesting. So you would take your design layer from your natal chart, and then the personality layer from the Kundalini, or almost like take a transit chart and add it to the design layer.
Both actually, because I still identify with the natal soul
personality
layer,
as well,
personality layer, but
so
it's kind of like I've got an added, and both they actually match, because the transit chart, the Kundalini chart, it was the cross of healing. So the conscious sun was in the gate 25, which is my design Venus, and I have a big Venus connection in my natal chart. My conscious sun is in the 31. So what Karen was basically saying is, you're basically here to be a spiritual teacher and just love everybody. Just go around and love everybody.
with the 25. And then, I'm wondering, well, I had this really interesting experience where I had apart from wherever another, and it wasn't it wasn't anywhere near as intense as what you described, but it did this part of me, which I still can just tap into anytime I want now, but that I have a lot of information about where that part of me anchors into in terms of dimensional information, and it took a couple of weeks for me. Like I remember one day watching the toast pop up from the pop-up toaster, and that I was so in that part of me. I was just so amazed by this pop-up toaster. I just stood there and laughed for ages. And my partner said, just come and sit down, I'll get you a cup of tea. But I couldn't stop laughing at this pop-up toaster. Like, this is crazy. What are you guys doing on this planet? But, you know, that as I integrate, I'm just thinking, you know, we talked in the Q&A this morning about how we have this array of dimensional parts. And so just purely based on my own experience, I'm kind of thinking this is a part of you that needed to be take up much more space, in a sense.
Yeah, I definitely had to do a huge amount of trauma clearing, a huge amount of clearing to raise my frequency for this part of me to come in. Yeah. That's what's clear now looking back. Yeah. And I'm sure this is only the beginning of the process. It's only just starting.
Yeah. I just think I mean so I mean I'm trying not to say too much, but I have so many things. Like I remember just hurling myself on the grass one night, and it was freezing cold. It gets like below zero where I was living, out kind of on the grass, just sobbing and saying, I don't want to do this. This is too hard. Like, just take me back. Take me back. I can't do this density. I'm sorry. Like, what? Yeah. If I agreed, I take it back. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well,
and I used to cry for days because of the trauma.
Actually, that was what happened at the Kundalini awakening, because I realized I could have checked it at that point. In my consciousness, my guru asked me, will you stay and serve with me on the planet? And I'm like, yeah, what else am I going to be? No way am I leaving you. And that was, so I died and I come back again. Yeah. She kept me here because I'm here to serve. And
one thing I do want to ask you is, and I think we might have just touched on this, the timing of these two experiences, the really intense experiences that you had. Have you gone back and had a look at the transits and the holographic chart and that kind of stuff? Is there anything that you've seen that kind of validates that or explains that for you?
Well, I guess the Kundalini, it would be the birth chart, it would be the transit chart, so that validated it. I can't remember if I've looked at the first awakening, but the funny thing was that happened on Samhain, Halloween night, when the veil is very thin. Yeah. So at that time I did know that I made that connection, even though I had no spiritual.
What year was that?
I think it was about 2002.
Yeah.
It was about a year and a half before I came to Ireland. So,
and because I know when, pardon me, I just noticed that you said that you have your Sarah's in 52.5. Gate 52 line 5, which is exactly where my son is, gate 52.5. And you were saying you always had this dream that you want to live in a little cottage quietly by yourself somewhere, which has always been my dream as well. Like I used to write poetry about it when I was quite young. I just want a little cottage where I can just write and do my thing. I thought that was interesting that we both mentioned that gate. But Pluto was in the 9 when all of this happened to me. So Pluto was actually making a channel with my son.
Actually, I think the Kundalini chart, the body consciousness layer was in the 52, was it? If I remember, 52 and 58. So would that be right? The 40, 25 and 46?
46.
52 and 58.
Oh, I'm not sure.
The healing.
I'm not
So I
sure.
think there is a link there.
It's very
between with
Plutonian, that, you know,
illness.
death and rebirth and the surrender and this incredible power and, you know, all of that.
Yeah,
And also from my perspective, looking at Pluto, and certainly Sarah's as well, that it opens a doorway to the multidimensional consciousness. I think that's Pluto's role now, way beyond the idea of, you know, the Lord of Death and the rebirth and that kind of thing.
yeah.
It certainly
It's
like exploded me into the correct. And it was weird how I knew it. It was weird how I felt at home with everything. I just
yeah.
recognized everything, despite the fact of only having just discovered tarot cards and now talking to, you know, all kinds of beings. And it was like, I felt more myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally
Yeah.
relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of me was terrified, and part of me was like, "Oh, finally!"
Yeah, I just was like, this, oh yes, see, I was like, oh yes, this feels so good. This is it's really funny. Let me see if there's anything here that I particularly want to ask you about. I think we've pretty much covered everything. Just the bees. Tell me about the bees, just to finish up.
So again, that kind of ties in with my guru. I Before I met her physically, I was doing a workshop with the psychic woman I was sharing about, and there's a saint here in Ireland called Saint Gubnet that had it was very connected to the honeybees. She used to use honeybees in lots of magical ways. And during this workshop, I realized I got these signs, and other people in the workshop realized I had probably a past life as her, or some kind of connection with her. However, these past life things work, I'm not sure. But I started like in kind of investigating honeybees, and I found there's actually a shamanic tradition in Europe connected with honeybees. I found this book, and it was
beautiful.
So I started like kind of understanding this whole thing about there's this queen, and she's in complete service to the hive, and the hive are completely devoted to her. It's this she just has a role, and she just has to do a role, and they have their roles. And then very soon after, I met my guru, and I wasn't looking for a guru. I was like, what is this? This is really weird.
Isn't that the thing though? Like, they can't be your guru if you're looking for them. It's almost like that kind of energy.
Yeah. But she was saying everything I wanted to hear that I was searching for. And then the honeybee came through. I was like, knew I get it. I knew I get the relationship. And she'd be like, you're great. You can go sit wherever you want. I always have to sit here. But she's in complete devotion. She's in complete devotion to me. And she's tough. Like, she will rip shreds to me if she needs to, out of pure love and compassion. And she actually started in the beginning coming through to me in my dreams as the honeybee goddess. So there is some link there for me in terms of that energy. So and the thing I've been a bit naughty. I've done my manifesting generator thing. You showed the Stellar Nations book on one of your webinars. I saw the recording, and I was like, oh my god, I've got to get that book. So I'm deep in that at the moment, Kim.
Isn't it amazing?
Oh my god,
I know.
that has blown me out the water completely. I'm getting more details for that than anything.
You know, it just does that. So that part of me that came in, and I got all kinds of information. I could see my family. I knew what they looked like. I could feel in that book, they have, which I got years after, they have described them so perfectly that I just sat there and sobbed. I could not believe that they could describe them so perfectly, even what they look like.
Well, during the Kundalini awakening, I had dragon energy coming through, unicorn energy, lion energy,
And these
cat
are all from the
energy,
Stellar Nation.
angelic, and
Yeah.
I picked up this book.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
I had someone contact me, and when I was in Sydney, and she said, I have to meet you. I've got to give you these books. You have to work with these books. And periodically, and that was quite a while ago, and periodically she writes to me and says, doing anything with the books yet? But you know, I always trust things always take longer than I think to come to any kind of fruition, but they're just astonishing. For me, the experience of reading them was astonishing.
It is mind blowing.
Yeah.
I'm on to the second half of the book, or you can done the cosmic humans, but the tie-in with the honeybees. It's not exactly conjunct, but I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Persepe, the honeybee cluster.
Yeah.
In the stellar nations, they speak about the star system called the honeybee cluster, Persepe, and it's actually in my conscious sun gate 31.
Oh, I love that. I love it. I love it. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was
Okay,
just like,
fantastic. Well, thank you for that. That was such a journey. Thank you for sharing all your wonderful experiences with us. I was just entranced the whole time. And it's lovely to for me to actually spend some time with you as well. Just chatting has been really lovely. So thank you for...
Thank you for inviting me. You know that this is always a bit challenging for me to do these kinds of things, but it's lovely to have somebody to be able to share with so openly and authentically.
And thank you for doing
really
that.
appreciate it, and I want to really thank you for what your service is, what you're offering people.
Oh,
I mean, for you come from my side, having gone through these big kind of things, that it's like, what on earth, to actually have somebody come in and sharing this information and to give me that validation has been so powerful and so grounding. Really, it's helping me ground it into, yes, this is valid and it is your experience, and you can own it and share it and speak about it, and in turn help serve other people. Yeah,
makes me so
thank
happy.
you.